Hello everyone, this is Mrs. Gornell and today I'm just going to give you a typical Year 10 product design lesson. This is basically building on your understanding of 3D sketching. So first of all, I'd like you to have a go at sketching a 3D cube, either in your book or on a piece of paper is fine. So, what did it look like? I wonder if it looked something like this. Or did it look something like this? Or did it look something like this? So these are all three different 3D cubes. Now, most of you will probably have done the first one. And I know in Year 9, we had a discussion about the second type of 3D sketching. So these are the two that you may have heard of already. So which one is correct? Well, they are all 3D cubes. However, there is one that's possibly the most accurate out of the three. Oblique is probably the one you drew, or most of you drew. And realistically, this isn't actually technically possible because you would not be able to see the front face of the cube square on if you can see the sides or the top. However, if you draw it in isometric, so you tilt that box so the corner is towards you, that is actually more accurate. But out of the three, this third one, which is called perspective, is the most realistic and accurate. And this is the one we're going to look at today. And if you notice, the difference between the second and the third is that the perspective box gets slightly smaller the further away it is to the screen. And that is how we see things in perspective, that they appear to go smaller the further away they are. So this lesson is all about 3D sketching and rendering, and you're going to develop your understanding of how to communicate design ideas by sketching and rendering. So there is a quote that says, you don't have to be amazing at drawing to be a great designer, but it does help. And it's true. If you want to communicate your designs to others, to a client, just to people in your class, to your teacher, and obviously if you are doing the course, to the person who is grading it and moderating it at the end, it's important that you can get your designs across through how you sketch them, how you render, and of course how you annotate them. So by the end of the lesson, you will be able to sketch a range of basic shapes in 3D and be able to describe what two-point perspective is. But also, hopefully, you can communicate those designs through use of marker rendering. So just to remind you of the basics of sketching, the main thing is to put your paper on a slight angle so it's not straight in front of you. So relax your shoulder and not draw from your wrist, because that way you end up with these curved arc shapes. It's also really important that you rotate the page as you're sketching to make it the most comfortable that you can. And particularly when you're drawing things like circles, again, maybe sketch from the top of the page rather than trying to draw it underneath. And you will find the technique that works best for you. So this is what you did in Year 9. You looked at isometric drawing, and you may have used a isometric paper with the triangles on, or you may have found you were confident enough to sketch freehand. This is absolutely fine, and this is something that is taught at GCSE level, and you can see from the sketches on the page that you can get very accurate, very detailed drawings using isometric. However, we're going to look at perspective. So imagine that you are stood on some railway lines, the idea being that they look as if they are going smaller the further away they are. In the same way that if you were stood at the bottom of a tall skyscraper, it would appear that it is disappearing off and getting thinner the further upwards it goes. If you were stood on a street, the same with the buildings. It looks like they're disappearing at 2 points either side. Those are called the vanishing points, and that's where they meet the horizon line. So we're going to focus on 2-point perspective. This is because often in product design, we are drawing products, items that would be on your eye line. So not that you're going to be looking up at them. You're probably going to be drawing something that is potentially tabletop size, for instance. So 2-point perspective would work best for this. So this is what we're going to end up with, really. You're going to have, on a piece of paper, 2 vanishing points at either side. And then we're going to create a range of cubes in 2-point perspective. And this is just a silly little cartoon, maybe just something that will help you remember what perspective means. Okay, so this is how you're going to do it. You need to start with a blank piece of paper, preferably A3, and just draw halfway down 2 crosses at either side. They are your 2 vanishing points. And this is all to be done in pencil. I'd like you to try and draw a straight line. Now, again, without using a ruler if you can, which is a challenge, but if you turn your paper on a slight angle, so you're sketching from left to right, you might find it more comfortable to draw that straight line. And I'll show you what I mean in a second when I show sketching as well on the screen. So then what you do is you just draw a diagonal line. As long as it goes back to the vanishing point, it doesn't matter the angle of it, as long as it always goes back to that vanishing point. And then another one, again, going back to the vanishing point on the left side. Then you want to draw 2 further diagonal lines, this time going back to the right side vanishing point. So what you end up with is this almost sort of weird rectangular shape, and you can see where the lines cross over. Next, you need to add 3 vertical lines. So they have to be parallel and make sure they are straight down. So it's only vertical lines that are parallel in this drawing technique. Finally, the one right in the middle, which is the nearest to you when you're looking at it, you're then going to draw another diagonal line going back to the vanishing point on either side. And hopefully now you can see how you've drawn a 3D box in perspective. And then you can start to add a slightly thicker line around the outside edge, and this helps to make it clearer, particularly when you have lots of lines on the page. So this is what we're aiming for. And by the end of the lesson, hopefully you can do something similar to this, where you have got a range of different size cubes along the horizon line above and below it. So what I'm going to do now, hopefully, is stop sharing the screen for a moment. Okay. And what I'm then going to do is to put the camera on, and then hopefully you can see what I'm sketching here. So this is just basically what you're going to aim to do. So first of all, what I've done is I've already drawn the horizon line, 2 crosses. I've already drawn a selection of cubes on this page, but I'm going to go back now to one that I'm just working on, and I'm going to show you what to do. Okay, so I've got my cross either side. I've already got a very faint line in the middle, and it's really important that you use a nice sharp pencil for this, ideally a H or a 2H, and keep it nice and sharp. Okay, so what I'm going to do, I'm going to start by sketching from the very point at the end, so from the vanishing point. I'm going to do it on this side. Okay, so I'm just going to draw 2 diagonal lines. As long as they go back to the vanishing point, that is absolutely fine. Okay, I'm then going to turn my paper around because I'm going to find it far easier going from left to right. I'm going to go all the way back to the opposite vanishing point. This is where it gets a bit more confusing. So I have to look where I want my straight line to go. And nice and straight all the way along, and then all the way along again. And what you'll find is the nearer you go to the vanishing points, the more severe the changes in the angle. It's going to look a lot thinner the nearer it goes to the vanishing point. So hopefully you can see that I've drawn here the top of my next cube. So it's up to you now. You can make a long cube, you could make a thin one. I'm going to do a little chunky one there. So when I draw my 3 vertical lines, they have to be vertical, they have to be parallel, but I'm just going to draw them quite short, okay? And then it's this middle one in front of you is going to go all the way back to the opposite, something like that, the opposite vanishing point, okay? And then I'm going to turn the paper around because I find it a lot more comfortable doing that way, and the same back to this vanishing point, something like that, okay? So hopefully you can see I've drawn this cuboid shape, but I've drawn it in 2-point perspective. The idea being that the nearer it gets to the vanishing points on either side, the smaller it appears. So what you have to do is have a go at filling a page with different size cubes. You'll find when you draw above the line, it's slightly different because it's almost as if they're floating in midair. So you're looking above the line. So therefore, start with the same thing. So start with 2 diagonal lines from the vanishing points. So I've got 2 from this point here. I'm just going to turn my paper around. Okay, from this opposite vanishing point, you might even find when you start drawing lots of lines that you can already use a couple that you've already drawn before. So I'm just going to use this point here. So this is going to be my next cube, okay? But this time I'm not drawing the vertical lines below it. It is above the horizon. So I'm going to draw my 3 vertical lines above. Same thing though, they have to be parallel, okay? But this time, this middle one is going to go back to the opposite side. So I'm just going to go from the vanishing point up to there, and then back down to the other side. It does go behind this other cube, so I don't really need to draw much of that line. So this time, this cube is now floating above the horizon. Okay, so what you need to do then is fill the page, roughly 6 to 10 of these cubes. And once you've done that, and once you're happy with it, then you can actually fine line them. And when you fine line them, it's really, really important that you try and turn that paper around and that you try and get those lines as straight as you can. However, on saying that, I have got some little hints and tips. So this page is sort of a one I did earlier. I've already fine lined them, and then what I've done is I've rubbed out the pencil lines once I'm happy with it, because otherwise it does get a bit confusing. And what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to share my screen again. I just want to show you another image on the PowerPoint that might show you a little bit more about marker rendering. Okay. So this time, this is hopefully going to inspire you to have a go with marker pens. The great thing about marker rendering is you don't have to be beautifully neat. In fact, sometimes less is more with the markers. And the idea is to just to give it depth and to try and make your work look 3D and make it look like the material that you're trying to communicate. So if it is a plastic, you want to make it look very, very shiny. And this is a great way with the markers to actually do that. Okay, so if I go back to my screen again. Okay. So this time what I'm going to do, I'm going to show you the basics of marker rendering. And this is something in class which we'll use a lot. And you can then develop this when you're doing your designs. So you can put down colour really quickly. And it doesn't have to be super neat. There's nowhere in the spec that says you have to draw beautifully neat drawings. However, as long as you can communicate those designs, then that is absolutely fine. So these are some marker pens that we use. These are Pro Marker ones, and actually you can get these yourself. Sometimes they do have offers on, so have a look online. So they're by Winsor Newton. You can get more expensive ones as well. These are still probably about £1 or £1.50 each. You don't necessarily have to buy a full pack. It might be that you only get a couple of colours. Or you might wait until you know what sort of project you're going to design and make and think about the colours you'll need then. But we also have plenty of these in the department that you can use as well. I like using the bright green colours. They stand out really well on the page, and also pale blues because you can build up the tone. So the way markers work is they have 2 different ends on them. We don't tend to use the thin end. We tend to use the chisel end. And the point of this is we want to put down colour quickly so that we don't have to spend a lot of time just rendering our designs, and we can move on to the next design sheet. Okay, so what I've done, I've fine lined already, and then also I've used a very pale grey marker pen first to simply go around the outside edge. That helps to build up a little bit of a darker tone before I even start with the colour. Okay, you don't have to do that. You will find with marker rendering, you will build your own style, and it might be slightly different to how I do it. That's absolutely fine. But there are a few rules which you need to follow. Firstly, Any object that you have has got a shadow around the outside edge. So even from year 7, you were probably taught to render darker around the outside and go lighter towards the middle. Exactly the same with markers. But also what we need to think about is where our light source is. So what I sometimes get people to do is to draw, and it might seem a bit silly, a little sunshine. You can even put sunglasses on him. The idea of that being that that is your light source. If the light is shining from that side, then it must then have a shadow on the opposite side. And that helps to remind you, because you need to have darker and lighter sides to give it more of a realistic rendering. Okay, so I'm going to use the chisel end, and I'm not worried about going over the lines. So this may seem strange at first, but trust me on this one, because what we will then do is neaten it up afterwards. I'm colouring, I'm going over all of that grey, but just along the outside edges. Because as I say, the idea is that you go dark on the outside, lighter towards the middle. Okay? Now, the great thing about markers is when you use the actual marker paper, which again we have in school, but you can get your own marker pads, is the special paper, it actually soaks through the colour, but it doesn't allow it to sort of bleed through to the other side. So what you have is it will build up layers of colour to make it darker each time you use the same pen. So that's how you get the different tones, and that's what makes it look a little bit more 3D and a little bit more realistic. So leave it for about 10 seconds and then add another layer of colour on. So this time I'm just going back over the same line I've done, using that chisel, so it's super quick. Okay, and then again, let that dry. So you could, if you want, do a couple at a time. Okay, so I'm leaving that to dry for a few seconds, and now what I'm going to do is think about how I'm going to show the light source. So if the light's coming from this direction, the opposite side needs to be a lot darker. So with most of the products we draw, because the tabletop size, we tend to find that there's a bit more shadow at the bottom because the light tends to be coming over your shoulder. So as well as it being dark around the outside edge, we also want it to be darker along the bottom. So I'm going to build up a little bit more tone now along the bottom edge. Okay, and also I know that this side is going to be darker still. So I'm actually going to start building in the colour. And you can do it quite streaky like I've done. There's no reason why you have to use it in the same way you would a normal coloured pencil. Okay, so now that's drying. Again, I'm just going to leave it for a few seconds. That will soak into the paper, and then I will be able to build another layer of colour on top. Okay, so what I'm going to do, I'm going to again go back over the bottom edge, go back over the outside, and let that soak through. And effectively, you keep doing this over and over until you've got as many layers as you need to show the different range and different tones. I often do sort of almost a couple of stripes to make it look like it is reflective. And as I said earlier, with marker rendering, less is more. Leave the white areas, because that doesn't make it look like it's unfinished. That simply makes it look like it is reflective and it's a shiny plastic. So even on the top where the sun's shining, I'm just going to put another little line just to give it that impression that light is bouncing off it at different angles. So after you've used the markers, that's what, a 30-second job really. What you can then do, and it's up to you how you do the next bit, but there's a couple of things you can do, is you can go over it with a soft black pencil. So just like an 8B or even a black colouring pencil, and just add a little bit more shadow along the outside edge, and particularly the bottom edge. So the side that's darkest, that's opposite the light source, you can shade that a bit darker, and the same at the bottom. Try and gradually blend it in so it sort of disappears into your colour, okay? But this really helps to make it stand out. Don't worry that it's not neat, and you're probably thinking, I've gone over the lines with my colour. We will neaten that up, and it actually becomes quite effective, and you'll find a lot of product designers, a lot of industrial designers use these sort of techniques. So this has come from industry. So I've added a little bit of dark black pencil there. What you can also do is you could block colour and not leave any white, but simply use a soft white coloured pencil like this one and actually use it to build up some reflective areas. Okay, so you can do that after you have block coloured it in. That's absolutely fine too. But the final thing I wanted to show you was that after you have rendered it, if you're worried about all these edges, the one thing that I would say as a tip is actually to go around it like I've done here with a black Sharpie pen, only around the very outside edges. What that does is it draws your eye just to the shape. You don't then see the colour that's gone out the lines as much. But be careful you don't do the inside lines, or it does end up looking a little bit cartoon-like. So I'm going to turn this round, okay, so that I can render left to right and fine line left to right and use the Sharpie left to right because I'm right-handed. If you're left-handed, obviously try going from right to left and see what feels comfortable for you, okay? But only do the very outside edges with your Sharpie pen. There you go. So now you've hopefully got a chance to have a go at mastering these skills in 3D, in having a go at the 2-point perspective and having a go at the marker rendering. And you can build up your own techniques. So this is a very different technique. It's very sort of streaky, but it gives the same impression, okay? So depending on your style, but this is what you will end up with. Okay, so that is your lesson for today. So it's developing your skills and your knowledge of how to communicate designs in 3D using that skill of 2-point perspective. So I hope you've enjoyed it. I'm going to go back very briefly to the PowerPoint just to remind you of those outcomes again. Okay, and also, just to show you that this is what you can end up with when you have a go at marker rendering. Not only can you do it with the pens, so these have been done with felt tip, the car and the whisks, but also you can then use those skills to build up on computer-aided design to render actually using the computers as well. So I hope you've enjoyed that. I look forward to seeing any of the work that you've done, and please ask me if you'd like to have a go at marker rendering in class. Thank you.